boundaries you set for your finances are one of the most impactful things that you can have. Of course, we know and we hear it said all the time that you need boundaries in life in general, not just in one area. Because when you don't have boundaries, you pretty much fall for anything. You are convinced to do anything. But when you actually think about that, in finance, is so important. And a lot of times we'll go throughout life and we'll notice or we'll come in contact with people who are very bad with setting boundaries in different ways, but definitely in finance. And they don't always experience all of the good that can come with setting boundaries with your finances. Now, for me, I can honestly say I do not have this issue. This is one of the things that I definitely know that I don't struggle with is setting boundaries, especially in finances. I'm not saying that I say no all the time, but I am very I do have, I would say, healthy boundaries when it comes to setting boundaries for my finances. Um, but when you don't have boundaries for your finances, like I said before, you are able to pretty much be convinced of anything. You don't have a lot of control, and your mindset, it impacts your mindset to where you're not thinking clearly when making good financial decisions. And there are many different aspects of setting boundaries, or different things that can impact you. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was being an advocate. Setting boundaries for your finances means that you are your own advocate for your finances. So I've said in previous videos that when we don't have control over our finances, anybody can tell us what we can and can't do with our money, right? So, and I don't mean just like a person, or I mean like you can be at a store and the store clerk is like, "Hey, you want this credit card?" And and your first mind is telling you, "Hey, don't do that." And you tell the store clerk, "No, I'm not going to do a credit card. I'm trying to stay away from credit cards." Or I just don't need any more credit cards. I have enough. Or I really can't afford to, whatever the case may be. You know within your mind that you don't need the credit card, but the store clerk is will tell you, um well, this credit card has this feature, and this credit card has this, and this credit card offers this. Or you can, if you get the credit card, you can use it this way, and all these other things. And they're trying to convince you that you can get this credit card, you'll be fine. But at the end of the day, they don't care what happens with that credit card once you swipe it and you start using it. They don't care that you don't have any control over your finances, or they don't care that you're impulsive when it comes to doing things with money. All they care is that they get credit for their credit card. And so we have to be strong, and we have to be knowledgeable of our situation, and we have to be our own advocates, and we have to be the ones that say, I know what my money looks like, and I know I have 10 credit cards. And even if I can afford other credit cards, I don't need an 11th one. Or I'm really, I'm debt free. I don't want any credit cards. Or I'm on a journey of being debt free, and I'm not going to get any credit cards. If you're not an advocate for yourself, anybody can tell you anything. Um, there was, I was speaking with someone, and I was telling them, um, you know, they're going through this process of uh, making a big financial purchase that they need to do. And I was telling them, like, hey, you have this money that you have access to, where you're able to make this big purchase. And this big purchase, it may be beneficial for you, but to make sure that you're managing this money right, and that this money actually lasts you, you may want to move this money over into a high yield savings account. And they were very they were in that moment their own advocate, saying, well, I don't want to do that right now because I'm about to make this big purchase, and um I don't want to move my money around because I want to make sure everything is in place. And I was trying to, for me, I was trying to convince them that, hey, even though you're about to make this big purchase, you haven't made the purchase yet. And you have this money sitting in this account where it could be over here in this account earning you interest on this money. And when you're being your own advocate, you have to know when to just listen to someone. You have to be wise on when to take the advice from someone, right? So there's a time you don't want to be your own advocate at the wrong time, right? So if I'm telling you like, hey, you have this money and this money is going to work for you in this account, you should move it here. So that when you do get ready to make this big purchase, this money would have been grown by then and will have some interest to it, and you have a few extra $100, a few extra hundreds of dollars in this account. Basically, pretty much make it back some of the money that you are going to be using for this big purchase. But they were very adamant on not doing it. However, the people that they're making the big purchase with are telling them, hey, don't do this and don't do that. But the things that they're doing is only going to benefit them getting the money for this big purchase. So you want to be an advocate for yourself, but you also want to be wise in who you're listening to and who's helping you make certain decisions. Because all of the decisions and the boundaries we set with our money should be about growth, about help making sure our money grows, right? So yes, we're going to spend money, but when we're advocating for our finances, how are we advocating for that? Are we advocating in a way where our money is actually going to grow, or are we stopping ourselves from seeking wisdom in a way where our money is just going to sit idle somewhere, or it's not really going to benefit us to the max that it can, if I'm saying that correctly. But either way, you want to be an advocate for your finances. You don't want to have everybody telling you what you can and can't do. And if there is someone giving you advice, you want to make sure you do your own research. You want to make sure that it's actually going to help you in the long run, that it's actually going to benefit the growth of your finances. Companies, like I said, companies are every company, and I did a short about this. Companies are always going to look at their bottom line first. Especially if they don't know you, when you're putting your money into a company, you're buying something or you're paying for a service or whatever the case may be, the CEO of that company is always going to be appreciative of you spending your money, no matter how much it is or what you're buying, because it's impacting their bottom line. And so if companies are looking at their bottom lines and they're convincing us to make decisions with our money based on what they need, we have to be just as strategic. We have to be, it's okay that if I want to buy something with a certain company, that is okay. It's my money. I can buy it if I want to. However, I have to think about my bottom line as well. So I should be thinking, just like the CEO is thinking about, if we get these amount of people to buy this item, it's gonna produce these results. We should be thinking the same thing. If I go out to this company and I or if I go to this bank and I take out this loan for this amount, how is that going to impact my income later on down the line? Or how is that going to impact my debt to income ratio? Or how is it going to impact my credit score? If I go to this company and I buy this item that I don't really need, what is that going to do for me in the long run? Where else can I put this money to make sure that it's going to actually grow for me? Every decision that I make, even though I'm still going to spend money. Of course, we're going to enjoy ourselves and everything like that. But there are times when we have to really be thinking, how is this going to impact me in the long run? Is this a good decision? Do I need to buy this? Do I need to invest in this? These are things that we have to be thinking when it comes to our finances. And so we can't let the CEO of companies be the only ones that are strategizing to make sure their bottom line increases. We have to make sure that our bottom line is increasing as well. Other people will try to spend your money before you do. Anywhere you go, there's always some, even if there isn't someone there. I think it was an article or something I heard where even when you go inside the grocery store, and I found this to be very true, they have everything placed strategically to get you to buy certain things. And you notice that whenever you go anywhere, that everything is placed very strategically to get you to buy certain things. And so everything that a company does is set up to tell you, hey, buy this. They're spending your money because you don't have the mindset to say, I know my numbers. I'm my own advocate, and I know how to control the money that I have to make sure that it doesn't go to the wrong places at the wrong time. And so companies are strategically spending our money before we do when we don't know how to control our finances. So another thing is we should be givers first and foremost, and don't be gullible, I guess I should say. So God does tells us to be generous with our finances. We're supposed to be givers, especially if you're a believer. We're supposed to be givers, not just to the church, but to people as well. However, this should also come with wisdom. So whether you have a lot of money or whether you have a little money, you want to always have wisdom even in your giving. So you're giving to your church, you give your tithe, but then you also give money on top of that. That's being generous, right? You're helping fund things within your church. And even outside of church, you give to your family, you give to your friends, you buy people gifts, you buy Christmas gifts, you give to the homeless, and all these other things. You are being very generous, and that's an amazing thing. What happens when you're so generous to the point where everybody is coming to you for everything all the time and you're starting to be drained? And this can be at any income level. I've heard that at multiple income levels. The thing is, people with a lot of money are able to control it a little bit better because I think they have more of an understanding that when you have a lot of money, you're going to get people that are going to start coming to you. And even if they don't get it at first, at some point down the line, they start to understand that you have to put a cap on it. You know, it can be a big amount and it can be a smaller amount. But at some point, you have to put a cap on it and say, you know what? I can't allow people to drain me of my finances when they have the same opportunities to go and make the money that I'm making as well. Now, you may not want to work hard to get there, but I had to work hard to get where I am. And so I can't sit here and drain myself to make sure that you get what you want or get what you need, and I'm being drained, or I'm constantly feeling like I'm being used or some sort. But we have to be wise with our giving as well. So the thing that I've told people is, because I remember I was at my job, and I came across this one. She was an older lady, and she was saying how she was just really, I could tell she was like really stressed because she had been in a place where people were coming to her for money all the time. And so make sure this is on. Okay. People were coming to her for money all the time, and she was getting very stressed. There was also another lady that I encountered one time where I think she had won like money from the lottery, and it was a lot of money. And you could tell like this was her first time ever coming in contact with this much money. And so she also had someone that I think it was her son or her nephew or somebody, who was starting like a food truck, and she was giving him money, a large amount of money, to invest in his food truck. And These are people who they really make you feel good because they love to help their family, they love to give, they love to just be um they love to be giving to people, right? And they love to help people. But when it comes to the point, when it gets to the point where you're being stressed because you're constantly being pulled on or you're constantly being drained, there comes a time where you have to have wisdom and you say, you know what? I have to organize this, right? So it has to be organized. So you're going to make a budget. How much how much am I giving to my church? I'm giving my 10%, which is this amount of whatever I make. And then I also want to make sure I give over and above that. So how much more do I want to give to my church? Maybe you want to raise the 10% to a percent, or you do the 10% and then you say, okay, well, this is the extra that I'm going to give on top of my 10%. However way you do it, right? Um, and then maybe you have an account set aside for your church where you have extra money sitting there. So whenever your church needs something, you already know. You don't have to think about, well, I'm going to have to wait till I get paid again, or I'm going to have to speak, whatever case may be, that if you don't have the money set aside or you don't have it organized, you have to go and move stuff around, or you got to pull from an account that you don't, want to pull from, or you have to pull from a bill or anything like that. But if you have that money set aside already and you label it church account, so whenever my church needs something, I know they're putting like some kind of campaign or whatever together. This is the money that I go into to make sure that I can contribute to whatever my church is doing. You're not draining yourself because yet another person is coming to you to help them, right? But you're doing it because out of the kindness of your heart, you're a giver. You can do the same thing for, you know, helping the homeless. Maybe you have money in your car that you keep in your car when you go out. You have an envelope that you take with you when you go out. So whenever you see homeless people, you're able to freely give to them, as you see them. Or maybe you have family and friends that you like to give to, you like to buy gifts for. You have a separate account to where every time you want to do something for them or if they need something, you have an account that you can go into to pull that money from. That's having wisdom. That's being organized. That's not allowing you to be drained. It's not allowing you to be drained and allowing you to be unorganized within your finances. And then when you look up, then when you need something and you don't have the money for it, or you have to go in your savings, or um, something big happen. Even if you make a lot of money, usually when you make a lot of money, the expenses that you have are a lot bigger than other people with a smaller income. And so sometimes it may seem like, well, I have all this money. It doesn't matter, if I give to someone, or if I do something for someone, because I still have a lot of money. But you still don't know what type of expenses are going to pop up out of nowhere. So even with a lot of money, you still have to be wise with how you distribute your giving and what you do with your money. So you can always just be wise by putting a cap on how much you give to other people, even if you are able to give generously. Sometimes when we give over and above, and we're not having wisdom, or we're not being organized with our finances, or we're not setting boundaries, we're actually not helping people, we're enabling them. So you ever have those people, your family or your friends, or whatever the case may be, who will always come to you, and they're coming, and it's the same people coming to you all the time, and they don't care that you have bills, they don't care that you still have a family, they just know you have the money. They don't, they see you traveling, or they see you doing different things, or they see you have a business, and instead of them actually putting in the work that you have put in, they feel like, okay, I can just ask this person and I know they'll give it to me because they've done it before. And sometimes you have to pay attention to things like that. You can't, you, God wants us to be generous, but He also wants us to have wisdom. And sometimes you're getting in God's way by not setting boundaries with your finances. I'll leave that there. Um, so purchasing a home, you should set boundaries. Things that you should set boundaries up front. These are just a couple things I'm gonna list real quick. Purchasing a home. When you purchase a home, you should set your boundaries up front. Like I said, when you are going through these companies, whether it may be whatever the case may be, you have to set your boundaries up front. Now, in certain situations, this is only gonna go so far. So, like with a home, you can only control it so much, right? Because it's based on a lot of different things. So you're not gonna be able to fully control. Like you can't go and tell them, well, this is what I'm paying for this, and this is what I'm doing for that. It's gonna depend on a lot of different things. It's gonna depend on your situation, but you still have to set your boundaries with this. Don't let your realtor, don't let your lender, don't let anybody tell you what you have to do or what you can't do or what you can do. You know your finances. You know the boundaries that you have. You know what you can and can't afford. And you have to go in with that. And then you discuss with the people that are helping you through this process. And you see how you all can come to an agreement to make sure that it also works out for you, not just work out for them. Because they're going to get their checks. You have to make sure that when you move into your home, that you're good and that you're not just being left to deal with whatever is going to happen from then on, and you don't have the finances or you've exhausted all of your finances going through this process. You keep your boundaries up front, even with your savings. When I moved into my home, I was very clear that I was not moving into this house broke. I let everybody know, like, hey, I don't know how we can do this, but I want to make sure that when I move into this home, that I still have money in the bank. I want to make sure that when I move into this home, that I can still afford the mortgage. I would not move into a home just because you told me, well, I can afford this, or because you looked at my finances, or I won't be, or even then I won't be moving into a home that I don't like, or I have to continuously upkeep because you've told me that I can only afford this amount. Because if that's the case, I can wait until I can afford more and I can get a better pre-approval. So I was very upfront with my boundaries, with letting them know I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, but we can do that, we can do XYZ. Now it did kind of get a little, like, at one point it got to the point where I had to sacrifice a little bit. But even in my sacrificing, I knew that I could trust God, and at the end, I still was able to make sure that I still had funds available to myself when moving into this home. So I wasn't moving into the home with just a house, because that's what I was not willing to do. But I made sure I set my boundaries up front. I didn't just let them tell me how it was going to be. I had to make sure that I knew what was going on and what I was willing to deal with. And so that's one of the things that you have to make sure your boundaries are set up front when it comes to setting boundaries for your finances. Um, Going into a relationship, you have to set financial boundaries when going into a relationship. A lot of relationships are either going to do two things: they're either going to drain you or they're going to help grow you. And if you're in a relation, and I'm talking about romantic relationships, you have to set your boundaries up front with that. Because depending on who the person is and how they manage their finances, if you decide that you're going to be in a relationship with them, even if you're just dating, it's going to impact you if you don't have boundaries. There's this guy I listen to on YouTube, and I love listening to his content. But the video that allowed me to start listening to him was it was a video I saw on Facebook one time, and it was him talking about how he sets budgets for his dating life. And I thought that was so genius. I was like, you don't hear a lot of people talking about that. And a lot of people don't do it. We just date and we go and we spend money. And sometimes some people try to do too much. It's your first date and you're taking them to these high class restaurants, or sometimes it's just what's the point? It's your first date, or you're dating this person. It's not like you if you haven't decided that you're going to marry them, you don't need to do a whole lot. But now, if it's in your budget, then hey, that's that's your budget. You make a lot of money, you can do whatever you want to do. That's your budget. But I thought it was just so genius about how he talks about how he, even with a large amount of money, he sits down every single month, and when he budgets for dating. And I said that's so good, and I think the video was him talking he um about how he was dating a girl, and the girl didn't like the fact that he had a budget, that he budgets his dates. And the thing that made me think about that was he sets him knowing how to manage his finances allows him to be confident in setting financial boundaries. So his boundaries are, if I want to date you, I'm going to date you. If I ask you on a date and you say yes, just know that I'm going to have a certain budget set for our dates. I'm not just going to go and take you to, this high class restaurant just because, I'm trying to impress you, but I'm always going to make sure that I'm looking at my budget. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know, his life, but I'm just saying in general, I think that it's genius to think like that. And when you're in a relationship, that's a really good financial boundary to set up front. Like, hey, especially if you are a high income earner and you're not married and you're dating someone, and you're going out on a date and they're probably looking at you like, oh, they got it. They can do it, or we can go here. And you're telling them like, hey, I have it because I know how to manage it well. And so you have to set that boundary up front. Like, hey, I make a budget for my dating life. So if you're saying like, hey, I think that's another thing he talked about, was there was a young lady who said, I want to go here next. And he said that he had to check his budget to see if that fit in his budget, or it didn't fit into his budget, and she didn't like that. But I believe that allowed him to see it. That wasn't the woman that he was supposed to be with, because that was a boundary that he had, and that helped him to weed out the ones who wasn't for him. And so that's another thing that we have to have boundaries set up front with our finances. Acquiring friends. When you have friends, when you're meeting new friends, you set your boundaries up front with your finances, right? So because sometimes you can become friends with the wrong people financially. You have friends who will also ask you for money. You have friends who they only want to hang out with you because they know that if they go and they don't have the money, that you'll help them pay for it, or you'll pay for them. You have friends who um just friends who are not there to help you grow financially. You have to let those friends know up front your financial boundaries up front. Like, hey, I'm your friend and I don't mind being friends with you. I love hanging out with you and we're cool. But when we go on this vacation, you got your money, right? You gonna have your spending money, right? Because I won't be paying for you. So I know for me, if I go out with friends, and I went out with friends, and my friends have their own money, um, and they manage their money as well. And so for me, when I go on vacations, I like to make sure I have the money to do things like excursions and things like that. So especially if I'm on a cruise, no matter how many days I'm on a cruise, I have to have an excursion for each different day, especially if it's in a different place, because I want to be able to experience that place to my fullest capacity. And so my friends were like, we don't have to do all that. We're going to do this excursion and we'll walk around in the other places. And that was fine because I was still able to go off and do what I wanted to do. I didn't have to think about, well, those are my friends and I want them to come along, so I'm gonna have to pay for them. Like, no, we all had an understanding that we all have our own money, and our own money is gonna buy certain things. My money is gonna buy for me to be able to go on these vacations. And that was my boundary I set up front. I like to do excursions on every port. So whether y'all come or not, that's what I'm gonna be doing. And I'll meet y'all back at the ship if y'all don't come you know. So that was just a financial boundary that I set up front. They didn't ask me to pay for them, and they didn't need me to pay for them. but they also didn't need to feel like they had to uphold some kind of like high standard and spend money that they didn't want to spend on an excursion they didn't want to do. And so you have to know in your friend group who can do what, who wants to do what, and who avoids what. And you set those boundaries up front. Like, hey, we're gonna all go to this place, and you're gonna pay for yourself. You're gonna pay for yourself, or I'm gonna pay for myself. Or maybe you are that friend where we're all gonna go and we're gonna take this person out to eat for their birthday. I'm paying for everybody. Hey, that's your budget. That's your budget. That's what you like to do for your friends. That's your way of giving. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as it's not draining you, there's nothing wrong with that. So you just have to set those boundaries up front. But if you are that friend, do you want to be that friend to where you're doing things for your friends that you want to do, but then they start to take advantage of that? Set those financial boundaries up front. um, and the last thing is be careful who you surround yourself with in your life. So I'm not saying cut people off. I'm not saying to treat people like they're less than you. I'm not saying to judge people for not having a good financial mindset or a good financial boundary. But those can't be the only people that we surround ourselves with. So if you're only surrounded by people who have poverty mindsets, or you're only surrounded by people who never have any money, or they don't like to work for their money, or you're only surrounded by people who are always coming to you for money, you have to, there are some people that you will maybe have to cut off. And then there are some people that you have to have a distant relationship with them. And you have to ask yourself, do I need another circle of people around me who can help me to grow more? Because at this point, the people that are around you, they're not helping you grow. They can't help you grow. You're the person who is growing. You've grown past the level that they're at. And so now you're up here by yourself and they're down here. And it's not saying that you have to get rid of them, but you can't only be surrounded by those people, because now you are going to start to be drained. Now you are going to start to be pulled in different ways that you don't want to be pulled in. So now you have to figure out, okay, I have to find my circle of people who are at my level who can also help me grow. So we can't be surrounded by people who can't help us, or people who can't help us, or only people who can't help us grow or contribute anything to our lives. If you're the only one that's constantly giving, or you don't have any financial boundaries and people are able to just pull from you in all kind of different ways and drain you, you're going to have to change your circle of people that you're around. So I hope that this was impactful. This is something that really set on my heart yesterday, and I was supposed to film it. But it's so important that we have boundaries in life in general, but also and especially setting boundaries in our finances is going to help us in so many different ways, mentally, emotionally, and definitely financially.